Well, are Labor and the Greens just playing politics when it comes to the health and well-being of our Indigenous population? Well, those two parties go on and on and on about identity politics. Some people in the government are actually trying to make a difference. One of them is Liberal Senator for Queensland, Gerard Rennick. He spoke out just last week about how Labor and the Greens continue to bluster and moan while real help is needed in our remote communities. Have a listen.
People shouldn't be prejudged by a label, by a race, by a religion, by their sexuality or where they came from. Furthermore, they shouldn't be held to account for the actions of their forefathers who lived in a different time and different circumstances. Yet that is exactly what many others on that side of the chamber seek to do, play identity politics instead of governing for all people.
Well, the Senator joins me now. Senator Rennick, thank you so much for your time. Who was it or what was it that got you so fired up in the Senate last week that Grab certainly didn't do justice what you were subject to?
Good evening, Cory, and good evening to your listeners. Look, I gave a speech last week about identity politics in response to a prior speech by Senator Penny Wong, who a few weeks earlier had come out and given a speech. And in that speech, she said, "We are no longer trapped in the ignorance of our own assumptions and prejudice, premised on the narrative of the supremism that white people know best." And I have to say I was shocked when I heard that. I couldn't believe that Senator Wong would single out non-Indigenous people as being somehow ignorant and prejudiced, and that somehow they believe in a narrative that white people, a supremacist narrative, that white people know best. And it was obviously, that was a speech given in NAIDOC week, and I just felt that, and I quoted a former Senator Jo Lindgren when she gave a speech earlier on, a few years earlier, where she said that Aboriginal people shouldn't be used as political footballs. And I felt that that's exactly what Senator Wong was doing in her speech, where she would for some reason refer to some narrative that white people knew best. And I just thought those comments were completely unacceptable.
But you're quite right, they are unacceptable. But Senator Wong has a long history of claiming merit and talent, and people report on that for her success. But whenever she is criticised, she blames people for targeting her sexual preference. I beg your pardon, that's now apparently a rude term or an insulting term, for her sexuality, her gender, her ethnicity, anything except her bad ideas. Now, is this really what the Labor Party has been reduced to, a sort of pale imitation of the Greens?
Well, look, it seems that way, Cory. It's interestingly enough, earlier this year, another Labor Senator, Helen Polly, tweeted, "Every life matters no matter what the colour of your skin is," and she was made to take the tweet down, and she was copped a lot of criticism from her fellow colleagues in the Labor Party. And look, we can't go forward with an attitude like this. As I said in my speech, all men and women are created equal. We should judge people on the individual and not the identity, and it should be based on mutual respect. We shouldn't be prejudging people on any factor, especially on where their background is, or everything else that I just said you could hear in that speech. And we should take people as they come and treat them with respect.
Yeah, but importantly as well, we shouldn't cut people a free pass for egregious offence or for bad behaviour simply because they've got a skin colour that is deemed more PC than being white, or because they're identifying as something in particular this day or another, or because they've got a different sexual preference or identity. I mean, these are cop-outs that are being used to provide a human shield from legitimate concerns, and targeting those as racists or bigots or phobes of some description for daring to criticise them. Is that what we're now seeing in our federal parliament?
Well, it is, look, it's a difficult one to answer, I guess, but look, as I said, people should take responsibility for their own actions, and they've got to be held accountable for their own actions. And if we judge on the individual, we've got to treat people based on mutual respect. But at the same time, too, a part of that mutual respect is if people need to be held accountable for their actions, But having said that too, if we see that there's issues in communities that need to be dealt with, we should deal with those issues in order to close the gap where we can. But it's the issues that we need to deal with, and it's the individuals we need to deal with. And there is no place for identity politics and virtue signalling when there are real problems that need to be addressed, and we have to provide real solutions.
Well, Senator, this is a really, really good point, an important point, because in my time in the Senate, I'm sure in yours, you've identified a number of issues that are affected or taking place in Indigenous communities. We know that sexual abuse, domestic violence, substance abuse is much higher in some of these communities than in the rest of the country. And yet it seems that you're not allowed to talk about that. You've just got to talk about the ideal of the noble savage, or you've got to talk about changing the national anthem or the flag, or somehow how Australians are also racist. Why won't the left, the political left, let us actually try and make deliberate and positive advances for those who are really, really struggling, rather than just shield them from these interventions that are absolutely necessary for their health and well-being?
Well, Cory, I think there is a genuine concern on the left to also close the gap, but that's what we need to be focused on, is closing the gap and dealing with those problems. And can I say, and I'm not an expert on this, but the best way to do that is to get people into work. I mean, there's plenty of opportunities out there in regional Australia, whether it be in farming, mining, fishing, or timber working, whatever. They're the roles that they're the areas that we could focus on in regional Australia in trying to get people to work. That's where we have a natural advantage in, and we should, because Labor basically make it pretty tough for regional Australia as it is. So if you really want to help close the gap, I think the best way is to encourage employment and encourage industry out there, as much mining and as much agriculture, especially those two industries, and to get employment, especially Aboriginal employment, involved in those industries. And I know the mining industry has been very proactive in getting Aboriginals into work there, and I think that's where we need to be focused, is on getting people to work, because dignity in work is dignity in life.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, I was talking to a young Aboriginal man the other day who was doing some very hard graft, and I said to him, how important is this to you? He says, well, if I wasn't working, I would probably be getting money to do nothing, and when you sit around with money to do nothing, you tend to indulge in bad things or unhelpful things, and that doesn't matter whether you're black, white or brindle. And that's what we need to see. We need to see more people with the dignity of work right across the country. And we need some positive interventions rather than trying to shield them from the bad habits and the deliberate misinformation, I think, that's been fed out there by the Greens and the left of the Labor Party. Senator Rennick, thanks so much for your time. I hope you'll come back and join me again in 2021. Merry Christmas to you, and all the best to your family.
Thanks very much, Cory, and Merry Christmas to you and your listeners as well.